It's thinking.
There
There
it
we
is.
go.
All right.
We are now live. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. This is a different face from the usual hosts that show up here on the Columbus Cartoon Coalition YouTube channel. My name is Kelci D. Crawford. I am a comic artist, and today I am chatting with Jack Wallace. Jack Wallace, would you like to introduce yourself for the viewership that is out there right now?
Hello, everybody out there in Streamland. Yep, my name is Jack Wallace. I'm a writer from Columbus, Ohio. I've been creating comics for uh, 15 years or something around there.
Wow.
I have a lot of different style. I'm mainly just a writer, but we put together quite a bit of. Uh, I've worked with a lot of different artists in the area. So I've worked with my own stuff from Disposable Fiction, but also with the Columbus Scribbler.
Nice. What got you into the comic scene, if you don't mind my asking?
No, it's a good question. I don't know. I think I've always had a real enjoyment of comics. I've loved comics from a young age. I think I remember writing around, and my brothers would all swap, X-Men for Avengers or whatever. Just on long car rides, we would read them together.
Hmm.
And I had always really liked writing in general, but for some reason, I kind of it's a rather long story, but to keep it somewhat brief, I thought writing comics would be easier than it was, and it took a lot more work than I ever thought it would. But I thought, oh, this would be something that it's not pretentious as novels. And
Hmm.
it's a nice, cool graphic medium. You get to work with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, and I just after that I tried my hand at like learning how to write them, and that became like a very long saga back and forth of trying to put books together and get artists and all that sort of fun
Hmm.
stuff. So it was something that I had initial interest in, and then thought I could probably pull it off, and uh, then it led me down a very deep rabbit hole for several
Yeah.
years now. So
Yeah, because you're not just wearing the comics writer hat, you're also wearing like the project manager hat and any
mhm.
other hat that is necessary for making a comic project happen. Yeah.
I found that if you're just a writer, then you have no other option than to wear the project manager hat, because there's a lot of projects to do,
Yes.
and you're going to be pulling them off. So you got to be good at emailing people. You got to be good at like putting together Kickstarters or whatever it is,
Hmm.
and and working it that way. So there's a little bit of an uphill battle for if you're only going to be a writer.
Yeah. But would you say that that labor is worth it?
I would, yeah. For those who are into it, for those who really, I mean, for me, I think it was very much a first love of the first time I ever remember writing a script and giving to somebody, and
Hmm.
the first time I'd seen thumbnails of having this weird idea in my head, and then seeing it projected through somebody else's lens was really cool. Like it was just a very interesting art form, and
Hmm.
it's a moment, it's a feeling I will never forget of like the first time. So I
Yeah.
think I've been kind of chasing that for a long time.
So I'm familiar with a little bit of your work. Like I remember picking up Frankenstein for Mayor ages ago and thinking it
Right.
was great. And I also have Chimera, which I have not read yet, but it is sitting on my shelf in the other room.
Fair enough.
So yeah,
Uh,
I wanted to ask because I know that you have a bunch of comics under your belt. Do you remember what your first comic script was?
ooh. Well, so I had, you may be around. Do you remember the days of like Pencil Jack and Z Wall and uh, digital webbing was another one. These were
I'm
like,
very familiar with digital webbing. Yes.
yeah, they were basically just AOL forums essentially for
Hmm.
comics people
Yep.
before social media was really such a thing. And so I remember on, I think it was digital, it might have been digital webbing for, or maybe it was Pencil Jack. For a long time, they had contests that you could throw out there, and they were that you just had to submit 6-page scripts,
Yeah.
and they would throw out a theme for you. And so I had started working through some of those, and I think the first one that I ever worked on was the first one I ever remember seeing, at least, was a comic I did called Run for Your Life,
Hmm.
about kind of a spy agent, who is notified that they have to be at the other end of town in 2 hours, so they have to script,
Hmm.
run, chase, drag their way across the city as quickly as they can with only what they have on them, and beat
Hmm.
everybody else to a point. So that was the first one I ever remember seeing and just being like, wow, this is incredible. It's a lot of fun. Like, so I was trying to make something that was very high paced, and that pulled out pretty quickly. It's good.
Nice, nice. Um, and regarding the rest of your oeuvre, as it were, you've been making comics. I think you mentioned 15 years. Um, so when did you first get into Kickstarter and crowdfunding? What was your first like dip into that, and what project
Hmm.
was it for?
Well, so I put out and I had those 6-page scripts, and I'd put out for a lot of those, and I had kind of funded those personally.
Hmm.
The first Kickstarter I tried to do was for Frankenstein for Mayor,
Okay,
and that was I think that when you and I met, we maybe met at Rathacon. So I think I had revamped Frankenstein for Mayor at that time, a long time
that's
ago.
right. I forgot you were at Rathacon one time,
Very, yeah, many moons ago.
many moons
Uh,
ago. Yes, yeah,
uh,
pre-pandemic levels of many moons ago.
yes, right, yes, exactly.
Yep.
And so anyway, I had wanted to try a graphic novel, and I needed more money than I could produce in one, well, to do it.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
but it was one of those things where you didn't want to raise the bar too high because you knew that you wouldn't get funding.
Hmm.
So what I did, but you didn't want to put it too low that you had to keep going out. So what I did is I split the book into two,
Mm.
and I ran a Kickstarter for just the first half of the book, and that
Hmm.
worked out really well. It was the price point was somewhat limited. I when I ran it for the second time for the second half of the book, it was a little bit more confusing for people because they didn't quite understand. Oh, am I buying a second half of a book that maybe they had the first one, maybe they didn't. It was a
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
all worked out. I mean, eventually the graphic novel as a whole got funded. But it was pretty fascinating and very educational to kind of watch people, and because you study people who are running Kickstarters and say, oh, well, those are good.
Hmm.
Those might be good returns. Those are good tiers. Those are good rewards, and kind of
Yeah.
and learn that way.
Oh yeah. And looking back on your old campaigns and being like, okay, so I offered these things, but nobody took those offerings, but people
Hmm.
really, really liked these ones. That's interesting. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. I'm kind of in that boat right now because I actually just launched today a crowdfunder, which is like a Kickstarter but different. And
Hmm.
we can get into that a little bit because the Columbus Cartoon Coalition will be launching their campaign on crowdfunder as well. And we can talk a little bit about the differences uh, later on in the chat. But I launched my crowdfunder today, actually. Um, and there's a couple nice things about it. The one of the nice things is I was like, oh, I should probably add a tier for this particular digital reward. And even after post launch, I could just be like, there we go.
Mm.
Now it's added.
Not
Um,
everything is set in concrete as in Kickstarter, which is that
yeah,
right?
which is really nice because like
Yeah.
Kickstarter, you gotta really know what it is
Hmm.
that you're asking for before you hit that launch button.
Hmm.
It's a lot harder to like launch a new tier or edit an existing one once a
Sure.
Kickstarter has gone live. And the other tricky bit with Kickstarter is that it's all or nothing. And
Right.
crowdfunder, you can do all or nothing, or you can elect to just keep it all, which
Mm.
is any funding that's raised, you get to keep it, even if you don't technically meet your goal by the deadline,
Sure.
which is a little bit more like Indiegogo in that regard.
I think I remember when because we had done Kickstarter for the first Scribbler,
Yeah.
and it was, I remember, I forget what we messed up. We messed up something major
Uh
on the
oh.
account, and I don't know if it was the goal that we were reaching or what. But I do remember launching it and going, "Oh crap, I forgot about this," and there was no other option than to cancel the whole thing,
Oh no.
redo it, and then build it back up. It was not a lot of fun, but
Oh, that sounds
yeah,
awful. I'm sorry you had to
exactly.
do that.
I mean, it worked out, but it is one of those things where you get all geared up and you're getting all ready to launch it, and then within the first 5 minutes you have to take it down, and it was disappointing. Luckily, nobody had contributed, so that was good.
Yeah, so that would have been just awful. I
Right?
mean, if anybody had backed, it would be relatively easy-ish to reach
Yeah.
out to them and be like, "Oh, by the way, we moved because there
Right.
was this oops."
Yep. Always with the oopsies. It's always a learning process, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. I had that earlier today, actually, with the crowdfunder that I had launched.
Hmm.
Somehow missed that one of the key tiers that I offered only offered shipping to the UK. I thought I had saved an option to add shipping for the US as well.
Yeah.
And thankfully, one of my very good fans pointed this out to me, and I was like, "Oh no, I'll go in and fix that." And thankfully, it was a
Yeah.
really easy fix. So another point in favor of crowdfunder, it can be really easy to go in and edit a tier after launch to
Yeah.
be
There you
like,
go.
oh, oops, forgot to offer this region for
Sure.
shipping out rewards as well.
Well, I remember. I think even for the Frankenstein for Mayor one, I had been trying to do some Facebook marketing and like
Yeah,
trying to punch a couple ads in, and I was like, I'll pitch it. Maybe there are people out of the country who want to get it. I'll just do the digital tier, and maybe
sure.
they'll just pick up for the digital one.
Mhm.
So I put a little bit of advertising money in Australia, especially the dollars are cheaper, so or
Huh.
it's a little bit less expensive to advertise overseas. But I had not fully really gotten together the shipping amount of what to ship overseas is.
Oh.
You kind of guessed at it, or at least I guessed at it, and I was way off, just absolutely
Oh,
horrendously
particularly
off.
for Australia, it can
Yes,
it can be
yeah.
ooh.
I'm gonna ship you a book to the other end of the world. I don't know why I thought this would be the amount, but it was not.
Yeah, that's one of those things that a hot tip for anybody who is
Mhm.
running a crowdfunding campaign, I highly recommend Pirate Ship. This was something that was recommended to me by a friend of mine.
Mm.
But pirateship.com, you can pretty much plug in an address and it'll tell you like the cheapest shipping method across
Oh,
a few different companies. Like they look at USPS, UPS, FedEx, and a few other ones. Um, and they'll give you the best price for the distance that the package has to travel,
huh.
which is
That is great advice, actually. That's really good.
there you go. Hot tip for you. You're welcome. They're great. I love them.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
choice.
yes, exactly. I do have a question for you, actually,
Yep.
since we're talking about Kickstarters and fulfillments and crowdfunding campaigns.
Mhm.
So, when funding books like Chimera or Frankenstein for Mayor, do you work with Comics Wellspring or another comics printer, or does it vary from project to project?
Uh, well, so I used to use Page by Page when Brian Dalton was still printing stuff.
Hmm.
Lately, I have moved over to Comics Wellspring as a printer
Hmm.
for shorter works, but I've honestly just been using a lot like very thick books, like ones that are actually need to be binded rather than stapled.
Yeah.
And for that, I found that I've been using Ingram Spark,
Hmm.
who uh, I am not crazy about their customer service, but I do love their prices. Uh,
Yeah, that's something that mutual buddy Ben Wright Human has mentioned before as well, because
mhm.
he's talked about Ingram Spark as well. He goes through them for a couple of his books.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, their prices are hard to beat, but
Hmm.
you have to essentially. It's like I think it's like $50 every time you upload a file to them.
Oh.
And so you have to make sure you have it right the first time. Otherwise, it
Yeah.
becomes very expensive very quickly.
Oh boy.
But once it's completed, if everything's correct in there, if your file is good to go,
Hmm.
I haven't been able to find anybody beat their prices. So
Gotcha.
take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. I know that Columbus Cartoon Coalition, or C3, is going to be working more than likely with a printer that's local to the Columbus area. So I don't
Great.
imagine that they would be working with Ingram Spark.
Sure.
More than likely, that's something that I'm going to ask Sydney for clarification on before
Sure. Yeah.
I goof and say something that I shouldn't.
Yep.
But yeah, if my intuition is correct, we've talked about it before because I'm a member of the board and we've
Yeah.
talked about the project multiple times.
Hmm.
Speaking of this particular project, we're talking about the C3 Anthology for 2023. You wrote a script for one of the projects in
I
this
did.
anthology. So, this particular script, I thought it was interesting because the entire conceit of the project is you wrote the script, and if I'm remembering correctly, there is a different artist for each page of your script.
Right.
Now,
That's the
is it
general hope.
yes, yes. Is this something that you have done before, or is this the first time that you have written a script like this for a project like this?
Um, I have written one script that had changed artists, but it wasn't on purpose. I had written I think I think it was about a 20-page script, and one artist had backed out halfway through, so I got somebody else to finish up another one.
Gotcha.
But this is the first time I'd intentionally done it. But I had been thinking a lot about this project, and I was actually just so happy that I was asked to write it. It was a secret hope of mine that I might actually get asked to write it. So anyway,
Oh,
uh,
goodness.
yeah, I was very excited.
Oh, that's
So anyway,
exciting. Oh my gosh.
I no, because I really like C3, and I wanted it to be, and I
Mhm,
this is something I could contribute. And so anyway, I had thought a lot about different character. I thought I wanted the characters to be able to change, right? And so
mhm,
we're working with characters that are going to be changing. There's going to be a lot of different artists involved, and I thought it would be. I wanted to kind of incorporate a way for the styles and the looks to be different, but
mhm,
but have that be cohesive within the story. And um, I thought about a whole lot of different ways of maybe these characters are changing, but I wanted to kind of include my love of comics for it.
yeah.
And so, what I came up with was just that there was going to be it was two teenagers who go into a comic book store and then travel into the world of comics, if you will. And so each page they're taking into a different genre of comics. Um,
Oh.
so I thought it would be interesting that, one artist can do, oh, well, they got the general superhero comics script. There's another one where there's a romance comics. There's manga
Mhm.
comics. There's and just kind of, I thought it would be a good way to kind of also play with everybody's unique individual style of drawing, kind of similar to the same characters, but they didn't have to look the same exactly. They could you could each artist could kind of make them their own, and I thought
Yeah.
that was a lot more fun rather than trying to make it cohesive and look like everybody's supposed to be the same.
Right, and really working with and having the pitch be, "Okay, we are deliberately going to make sure that each artist is going to have their own interpretation on each page, and we are working with that limitation. Here is how we are working with that limitation."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Building that into the form of the script before we even know it, before it just in lay of concept.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So that I'm very excited about how it turned out. It was fun. We'll see. I'm excited to see a lot of the art and stuff for everybody to pull back
Same.
in.
I
So
am excited to see how the final like iterations are going to turn out. I've
yeah.
been seeing some people post their works in progress on the Discord server,
Hmm.
so
I
that's
was
exciting.
more. Yeah, I think the only thing I wasn't sure of was how many pages to write, because you didn't know how many people were going to be in it, or whether it was going
Mm,
to be, that became a little bit.
yeah, yeah, and there are other projects that are also going into the C3 anthology.
Mhm.
The script that you wrote is for project number 3.
Right.
There's 2 other ones that will also be making an appearance in this book.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's also that limitation working in there. So it's like, okay, so these other projects are this many pages, and so that
Mhm.
means we only have like this many to work with for this script. So, question for you, because this is something I've always wanted to ask comic writers. Page limitations,
Mm.
boon or bane?
Oh, boon. Total boon. Yeah. I I like it. I like it. I think it's good. I think for most of the short fiction, I've mainly dealt in short fiction for a lot of it, and I really
Okay.
like having to do. You get 6 pages to tell the whole thing, and that is, or 6 to 7. I mean, thereabouts.
Mhm.
Um, I think when I was writing more like graphic novels, there is something really nice about being able to let the characters breathe and have
Mhm.
being able to throw in slow moments, and you can change the pacing around. You can open it up and give it a lot more back and forth.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But with short comics, it's like you tell your story and then you got to get out of there, and then it's
Mhm.
you're working with, maybe you can't have that many, you can't have a huge cast of characters. You have to focus on maybe 2 or 3,
Mhm.
and kind of make sure that all those things get knocked out. So you can't, there's never any uh dangling storylines that you didn't get pulled off or anything. It's very much, this is the wind of it.
Yeah.
It's as long as I wanted it to be. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think I don't know, as a creator, maybe you've dealt with this. Have you ever created a story and you're like, oh, it turns out that was just an idea for a story. There wasn't. Sometimes you get into it and you're like, I'm gonna make this big thing, and sometimes you're making a big thing out of something that it wasn't all there anyway. It just turned out that it was
Mhm.
just good enough for a small
All
thing.
the time. This is kind of the problem with people who are both artists and writers, who can do both, is that you come across an idea and it can be hard at first to judge whether this is like a 17 chapter long epic or if it's just something that's only going to last like 4 pages.
Right.
It can be really hard to gauge sometimes depending on the idea. Like there was one idea that I had that I was like, oh, this thing could be freaking huge, but every time that I worked with it, it struggled past page 20. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is interesting. But then there were other ideas that, like, most notably, there was one short story that I was like, okay, I'm going to keep this to 12 pages. And then it morphed into 15.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They'll
So,
grow on you. Those characters, I mean, whether you like to or not, they will do whatever they want to, and when they're not done, they will
yes.
do whatever they want to.
Yeah. It's like, oh, kudos to this one author who, back when I was in college, we actually had a guest speaker from Marvel Comics come in and talk about the craft of writing comics. And he did this like workshop thing where he passed around this kind of a slip during the workshop that was like, so here's the beats that you need to hit, here's what needs to be shown in the story, and it has to fit in 2 pages. And I
Hmm.
remember looking at that with my background of 17 plus volumes of manga for any given series or
Sure.
other long works and being like, I don't know how to do this. And then at the end of the workshop, he showed, so this was an actual script that I worked with, and here's the final result. And I was like, oh, no, that's just not fair.
Right.
Like, how dare you tease us with, like, okay, you need to hit all of these things. Oh, I already did it. Here's how I did
Yeah, sure. I I was actually I was just reading the DC Tales of Visual Storytelling, something like that. There was like
Okay,
a
yeah, yeah,
DC
yeah.
book about like a and that was one of those, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was one of those books where they do kind of, I mean, it's not the Scott McCloud Understanding Comics, but it's similar to that, where
Very
you're right, exactly, yeah, it just similar to that, but they were displaying one of them that I thought was interesting, where was they had given a kind of a script to 3 different artists, and it wasn't
okay.
anymore, it was just like a paragraph, and each one had to break down the views and images for how they say it. I mean, there are
Okay.
so many ways to visually picture how you want this to look.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a writer, when you hand something off to them, I've had artists be like, "Look, I just added this panel, or I broke this over into the other page," and
Mm-hmm.
you realize that, oh man, they really changed it, they really made it so much better, because you
Mm-hmm.
can't, I think, without just on text, it's very hard to realize what is going to come out of it. And sometimes for writers, we need to realize, oh, you need to break this up or change it out, and it's hard to know
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah, it can be hard to judge that sometimes with your work. Quick
Mhm.
question for you. Is this the first anthology project that you've done, or have you done other ones?
I have submitted to anthologies before,
Okay.
and I've been in parts of them, but never. Uh, like I've definitely had, and I've created anthologies. We did a similar CX way back when, before the Scribbler was a thing. We did a Columbus Cartoon Coalition, or no, it was a Columbus Creators Anthology, where we just had,
Okay.
uh, I think, 5 or 6 other people that
Mm-hmm.
we all pulled together some money, and um, it was weird because it was like the only anthology that you had to throw money in to be a part of. But
Oh, gotcha. So
the
this was like early days.
yes, so the goal was, what we did was, I got maybe 6 or 7 artists to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
We all pulled in 6-page stories, and then uh, we everybody threw in, I think, $20 to $30, and then we
Mm-hmm.
got them all printed for as cheap as we could, and then we distributed them out at all of dropped them off at the free comic book day, just
Mm.
as, so for every time, our goal was like, hey, if people are trying to get free comic books, at least here's a bunch of local artists that they could be reading, and the only way we could do it is by shoveling out our own money to do it. But it worked out. It was a lot of fun. It's a good
Yeah, so
project.
it sounds like a proto scribbler in a
Kind
way.
of, yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
was a early days, right?
Yeah. And also, out of fairness, I feel like I should bring this up. You were one of the authors for a short story in What the Gnomes Know, a comics anthology.
That is correct. Yes.
Yes.
So that was the Gnomes anthology that we had done with Ben Ray Human and Ian Ranker. Uh, Ian,
Yeah, Rainer Canestein.
Rayner. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, Rayner. If he's watching, I apologize. Um,
How dare! Sorry.
yeah, and that was a lot of fun. I know that you have been a big part of those anthologies for a little while. Is that right?
Yes, and we're gonna be. I'm gonna be working with them on the next one, but that one is gonna be like way after the C3 anthology, because we're
Hmm.
still figuring out like who is going to be contributing to the next anthology project.
Sure.
It's going to be a while before we even go
Get
back
down
to
that
the
road.
crowdfunding wells for that one.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. Whereas the C3 anthology will be launching a lot sooner. Like, official date is going to be August 14th. Wink wink nudge nudge for everybody who's watching this right now, whether it's live or on the replay. But
Sure.
yes, August 14th is when the C3 anthology will be launching on Crowdfunder. Social media links will be along the
Plenty.
bottom. Ko-fi.com/cartoon Columbus Cartoon Coalition. We'll be doing plugs again at the end of the episode. Anyway, now that midway through plug is done, thank you for bearing with me.
Oh no, I appreciate it. No, and you've been so what do you think as far as anthologies go? Do you prefer them over other ones? Do you read anthologies normally?
Normally, it depends on the anthology. I'm really picky about my anthologies, actually. My first one that I ever read was the Flight
Mm,
series. I don't know if you're familiar with that one at
mm,
all.
nope.
Okay, so Flight was coordinated by Kazuki Buishi and a few other artists.
Mm,
A lot of the like big names from first, second press nowadays got their start in the Flight anthologies, like
okay.
Jen Wang, Becky Cloonan,
Mm,
and a few other ones got their start through the Flight anthologies. Also, Tony Cliff, creator of the Delilah Dirk comic series, absolutely delightful. Highly recommend that series.
Nice.
Yeah, he also got his start in Flight, the anthology series. And basically the theme for Flight was each short story has to deal with the theme of flight in some way or another.
Oh.
It can be interpreted as specific or as loose as you wanted, but it has to do with uh the word flight. It could be flight of fancy, flight away from home. There was one short story that was just a fox being shot out into space and finding alien worlds.
Wow, that's
which
cool.
which was really really cool. I don't know where you can find copies of it nowadays. The two copies that I have found, I had to buy them secondhand from like half price books.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So half price books. If there's one near you, check them out. Maybe they'll have
Yeah.
Flight. I don't know.
Excellent choice though. That's cool.
Yeah. So them and also Iron Circus Comics has a lot of
Mm-hmm.
really good short story anthologies. I actually contributed a short story to an upcoming one. It's not out yet, but it will be coming out sometime in the next year. Knock on wood.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I really like Iron Circus. So they're really putting out a lot of very interesting books.
Very cool books, yeah, and
Hmm.
they also have a animated series that they're trying to crowdfund for.
Oh
So
wow.
shout out to them for that. That's
I
awesome for
think that
them.
they were like listed as like the third largest publisher in the Midwest or something too, which was just kind of unreal.
Yeah, wait, do you know Midwest? We really need more people like Iron Circus Comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why Columbus Cartoon Coalition also exists, because we are
There you
also
go.
based in the Midwest and we also got some cool people. You're welcome.
Actually, yeah. That is a hard statement to argue with. We do have some of the coolest.
We do, yeah. Particularly in Columbus. Columbus has got a really cool scene. I'm still getting used to the Toledo area, which is
Hmm.
actually where I'm based out of, but I'm really familiar with the Columbus cartooning scene because I participated in that for like almost a decade now.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
I've seen you in most Ohio cons, like just all the way through, and you've gone all the way
mhm.
through. I'm sure I've seen you at the Rathacon and a couple of the others. So have you been to the Cincinnati? Have you been that far south for it?
Not yet. I
Okay,
was thinking about doing it this year, but I backed out at the last minute because I was like, I've never been there. I don't know what to expect.
yeah,
In fairness, the first half of this year, I've been pretty burned by some particular shows. I'm not going to name them right now.
sure, yep.
Um, but yeah, I've done Ohio shows. Like I actually went to Gem City Comic Con for the first time this
Oh,
year,
nice. Hmm.
so that was really cool. Rathacon, pretty regular appearance there. Love
Yeah,
Rathacon. They're great people. Um, and also a few other ones like Space in
yeah,
Columbus.
of course.
Space was actually the first show that I ever tabled at as a
Oh,
vendor. Yeah.
I feel
So
like that's like a rite of passage. Everybody knows Bob, and everybody salutes Bob as being kind of like the underground comics king of
yeah.
Columbus. You know? It's great.
Yeah.
He does a lot for us, and he gets very little in return because it's just, we all are so appreciative of Bob for everything that he does.
He does put a lot into like space and
Hmm.
running space and doing a lot of like comics community related things. Like kudos to Bob. One of these
Yeah.
days we will get him again for another live chat. So question for you, when did you first meet Bob? Bob Corby, for folks who may not know.
Sure. Yeah. Bob Corby. Let's see. We met way back when, I think before, when I was still doing my first book. I had a first anthology, and I think I tabled at Space was not my first show, but it
Okay.
was very close. Um, I think my very, very first show was uh, the Independent Creators Expo, which is no longer a thing. It was out in Dayton.
Oh, I was thinking of the Youngstown one because Youngstown had
Ice.
a indie creator
Yes.
expo as well. They'll be coming back next year.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Yeah, they took a break this year. They're coming back next year.
Yeah, I hadn't been to that one for a long time, and it was perfect for my first one because wasn't. Um, it was a little bit slower than a lot of the ones that which is lucky for me. When you're tabling at your first show, you're so terrified and that
Mhm.
nobody's going to even look at your work. And sometimes you're right, and it can be a hard lesson to learn. Like you really have to learn. You don't even know what to tell people about.
Yeah,
Once you get a
really
while.
hone the elevator pitch.
Yes, exactly. And you learn that by just kind of tracking people down and hoping that they'll stop at your table and then
Mhm.
figuring out, oh yeah, well, how do I present my work in some way? So it's good
Mhm.
experience, honestly, more than anything is once you kind of get in there. I'm sorry, I realize I'm rambling from your question, but my first time
You're good.
was going with Bob over to space was I think the first space that I went to, it was may have been different than most, and it was probably one of my favorites because it was there.
Okay.
Space had moved that year.
Hmm.
That very particular year, they had changed locations, and Ken Epstein had helped Bob with creating Extra Space, which was held at. There's a place in Columbus called Blockfort.
Oh,
It's over in West Ridge.
okay.
Uh, there's it was really great because it was a small group. They had a beer tap there. It was a very small location where and not a lot of people were expecting it. So
Mhm.
we were getting more of like a farmers market crowd and just a very people would just wander in and be like, I don't know what this is, but they would end up walking home with comics, and it was a magical thing. You
Yeah,
could sit,
that could either go really well or really badly.
exactly, yes, either they love it or hate it, and that's
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
it was also the first time I met Bray and Canini because we were sitting together, and that was the first time we ended up having beers and just watching and trying to sell comics to people. And so it was a lot of firsts for me. And space has always been uh,
Mhm.
super just welcoming to everybody else. I think I can't I count the number of people that I've met from out of town. I mean, space has people from Georgia to I met people from Toronto and all kinds of places.
Mhm.
Just everybody's out there chucking their wares. And honestly, it was if I have gotten anything out of space, it's just the true community of creators, which is always been there for supporting. So
Mhm.
that I think is one of the best parts about space is it really is it's about all the people who are going to it and selling comics and um, making our own stuff. There's not a lot of fan art. There's not a lot of big other shows. There's not even any comic retailers, or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's
The
just us little guys out there,
Right.
you
Even the
know.
comics retailers that do show up are local mom and pop ones, like thinking
Exactly.
about Laughing Ogre Comics. They almost
Right.
always have
Exactly.
a table there, but
Mhm.
they're like really unobtrusive.
Right.
Um, yeah,
I
like
I just
they're
knew.
not like hauling in gosh, thinking about the latest comic convention that I was at, they're not lugging in like these massive wooden bookcases full
Right.
of like the trade paperbacks. There's a
Mhm.
distinction between a trade paperback and a graphic novel. I am sorry, comic sellers. I am going to ride this and I will harp on you about this. But like all these like, comic all these like big name comic shops coming in and taking up like two or three vendor spaces with like
Mhm.
these big wooden bookcases. Like there's not that at space. At
Right.
space it's maybe two tables
Mhm.
and artfully arranged books
Right.
that they offer. Which,
Yep.
just mwah, good
Yes.
choice. Yeah. And I love that the vibe at space is just indie creators setting up their stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
There, and I mean, I've been through. We have a lot of supporters who, I know like World's Greatest Comics ends up. I've seen them at like GalaxyCon and a bunch of. So there's no. I'm not shaming any of that. I enjoy that as much as anything. But I was thinking about it in comparison to like say GalaxyCon in comparison to like space.
Right.
if you've been to both shows, there's a
That's
world of
very,
difference.
very different.
Yes, where there's you can't get Eric Estrada's autograph, unfortunately, unless he's there at a thing. But
Unless he's at Space
unless
for
he's at Space
any
hanging out, which
reason.
would be great.
Yeah.
If Eric Estrada, if you're listening, you are more than welcome to come to Space.
I mean,
We'll,
why not?
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, local people showing off their stuff, and other little indie creators getting together and talking with other indie creators. I do love that at Space there's just a lot of creators talking shop
Oh
about
yeah,
different things.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you'll get that at pretty much any show, but especially Space. Space is
Mm-hmm.
really good for that. And bringing this back around to Columbus Cartoon Coalition, C3 has shown up multiple times at Space. That was actually how I first discovered them. Was they had a table at Space last year? I want to say it
Oh
was.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they had a table there, and I was talking with Sydney, and one thing led to another, and now I'm on the board.
Yes, perfect. Thanks,
Like you
and
do.
I'm so happy that you are. Honestly,
Oh,
we
thank you.
yeah, C3 is great, and I'm very happy that it exists. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
we being part of the Columbus Scribbler. I'm very very much into us building each other up as creators. We are much stronger together than we are apart. And
Yes.
I think it really shows it's kind of what makes Columbus a comic city, and one that
Mm-hmm.
is so individually unique, is that we
Mm-hmm.
are here and we are talking to each other and talking shop and figuring out what panel works best for this thing, and
Mm-hmm.
what ink pens do you use when you're scaling, just everything. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the whole craft of it is we're not it's such a unique and interesting art form, uh, that it's something that, if you really love it, you really love it. And I think that you've seen so many people. I'm always so impressed by the number of people that are finding out about it for the first time, or have been doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, even from the Scribbler perspective, I thought I'd met everybody at Space for the past several years, so I thought I knew everybody. But I'm constantly in awe of
And then
new
surprise,
students.
open for submissions for the Columbus Scribbler. There are
Yeah,
all these other comic artists that
more
come out of the
people than I.
woodwork.
Exactly, yeah, which is great. That tells me that comics is alive, and that people are still creating them out. That's good. We need that.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's always a big concern is like, oh man, I feel like I know everybody. So I feel like I know what kind of submissions I'm going to get when I open for them. And then pleasant surprise, there are new artists that are submitting their work to you.
Well, and when you're a student at CCAD, or if you're in comics in general,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of already in that world, and you're talking to other people about it. But when you get out, it's kind of like everybody. I don't know. It's hard to find that group again. So I'm always
Yeah.
happy. I'm always very happy that still exists. So
Yeah, that whole finding comics community can be the trickiest part of being a comics creator,
yeah,
which is why I'm so glad for not just the Columbus Cartoon Coalition, but the fact that we also have a Discord server.
right, yeah.
Yeah, that, and I'm a part of a couple of other comics related Discord servers, and honestly, thank goodness for that, because like that, just being able to reach out to other creators and talking shop, or talking about like the ins and outs of creating comics is absolutely necessary, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, figuring out what not to use when you're what Kickstarter, what is a terrible Kickstarter reward,
Yeah.
or I mean, just all of those things that you don't know about until you get into it. Because everybody,
Hmm.
somebody's always learning. Well, everybody's always learning, but
Oh yeah.
it's always somebody's first time doing any of this stuff too. So
Hmm.
anytime you can pass on that knowledge is great.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I know very few people who would start a comics newspaper like what you've done. And you and I have actually talked outside of streaming
Mhm.
about the Columbus Scribbler and some of their finer details about it. So I just want to touch on it generally.
Sure.
When did you start the Columbus Scribbler, and how did you find the collaborators who would help you behind the scenes?
Well, I had the idea for a lot of years actually, just
Mhm.
because but in my mind it was kind of like a magazine. Maybe it was kind of like maybe the 614 or some of the other free magazines that you would put out, or maybe just a regular comic book.
Or like
Um,
that proto project that you brought up earlier in the
right?
chat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Or like
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. Like something like that. Um, I had talked to every person I had known about it, but I was always like kind of cagey too, because I didn't want to give away the whole idea for a lot of it.
Mhm.
I wanted to be part of it. It was something, but it was also something I knew I couldn't do alone. You wouldn't even want to do it alone. It kind of defeats the purpose
Yeah,
of
it's
doing it.
it's it's a pretty big endeavor. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Even from a distribution point. So
Mhm.
I had talked to a bunch of people about it. I didn't get a lot of positive feedback, to be honest with you, when we were first starting out the idea. Everybody's like, either they were busy with their own thing, which is understandable, or they were they're like, that sounds like a great idea, but I don't have any time to deal with it, which
Mm.
I understood.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I had
that's fair.
originally pitched it to Steve, and Steve kind of got back into me. He was the one who kind of pitched it as a newspaper. But even with just the two of us, it still didn't seem likely that we were going to be able to pull it off. So we had maybe gone back and forth and had one meeting, and then finally, I think I talked to Brian. Brian had gotten talked into it by his wife, which I was very thankful for. She's like, she had kind of he thought it would have been a very good idea, and she was the one who was like, well, this is, you should maybe look into this, at least meet him for lunch or whatever. So
Mhm.
we ended up meeting for lunch, and he said he was in, and by that point we just sat down. Everybody, I think we met at Hound Dogs and got a pitcher of beer, and then hashed out the details of what we wanted it to be.
Mhm.
How is this even going to work? um,
Right, yeah.
we didn't even know what we wanted in it, what it would even look like. The
Mhm.
meet the figuring out the meet the people thing. The history comics, all that stuff was like, it was all kind
Mhm.
of stem from that one kind of parlay session of, hey, here's some ideas that we might want to put together.
Yeah.
Uh, and from there, we had pitched together. We got some people that we actually knew and trusted and wanted to display,
Mhm.
to submit their own first stuff. And that once we had that, we were able to kind of build around that, and then set it up to go, uh, do a
Mhm.
Kickstarter and that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Which, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a all uh, it was one of those things where you don't know how it's going to turn out, and you just kind of keep going
Mhm.
until you hit a brick wall, and we never hit a brick wall that was solid enough. So here we are. We're still doing it.
Smash through it like the Kool-Aid man.
Yeah. I think more like push it over like sullen old people. Just we could bear. I mean, it was each time. There's so many battles with something like that. You never know
Mhm.
what you're gonna. It's like running into a hurdle, like doing hurdles. Except every time you jump, you just kind of fall over one. You get up and you fall over another one until finally you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 second. I'm so sorry. I have to do this. I have to step away for a second because I just heard a knock at the door. I think I know who it is.
Okay.
But give me just a minute.
Yep.
Okay, I'm very sorry about that.
You're all good.
Yeah. Okay, so actually this would actually be a good cue to like start wrapping it up. So
Sure.
let's start wrapping it up, because especially since we're at like the 48-minute mark anyway.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I could talk to you for ages though.
I hear
So
you. We are. Yep. I've very much enjoyed having a conversation. So.
oh, absolutely. I very much appreciate you taking your time to sit down and have a chat with us
Mhm.
about your project for the C3 Anthology and some of the stuff that you've done behind the scenes and in your other comics projects. So, where can people find you online if they would like to find out more about you?
Absolutely. I would recommend the ColumbusScribbler.com is where you can find pretty much everything related to the Columbus Scribbler. If you're interested in submitting
Hmm.
comics, if you're looking for advertising, if you're looking to buy a fantastic shirt, we have them all for sale. Whatever you like
Oh,
to do.
look at this model displaying the
Oh,
Columbus Scribbler shirt for us.
yes,
Yes,
that's
so
right. Yep.
saucy.
uh, we've been so in short, just to kind of explain, the Columbus Scribbler is a free newspaper that we distribute throughout the city. Our whole goal is to highlight the work of local creators and to educate the public about the comics media. Um,
Yes.
all our issues are up for free. You're welcome to check out any of them. It's a great cause and something I'm very passionate about.
Mhm.
If you want to check out my own personal work, you can check out disposablefictioncomics.com, where we have several pages out there for free. I think you can read 2 anthologies up for free, and there's links to graphic novels that I've written and have been part of. So definitely check it out. Yeah, please. I hope. And I guess for the CX3, I guess wait for the Kickstarter, which will be coming out on August.
Oh, the crowdfunder, which is coming out
Crowdfunder.
August
Thank you.
14th. It's okay. It's a relatively new platform. I can go ahead and talk a little bit about the crowdfunder
Mhm.
because I've actually done a couple of crowdfunder campaigns. So crowdfunder is a little bit like Kickstarter in some regards because they're both crowdfunding platforms, and the goal is, hey, I want to make a project. I need this much to make it happen within this many days. Can you help?
Mhm.
Very similar pitches, but the way that they go about it is subtly different in different ways. With crowdfunder, you can very easily go in and make adjustments even after you hit the go live button, which is just great. Um, Other great things about crowdfunder is that it's really easy to share the links and everything because, like, you have experience with a Kickstarter, so you know
Mm.
when Kickstarter generates a link to the campaign page, it's like this long.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like crowdfunder actually is like crowdfunder.com/name. And that's
Right.
it. It's super easy and it's great.
Mhm.
So really easy to share links in that regard. Also super customizable page fronts, all of that stuff. You can actually like select a background,
Okay.
which is like I didn't even know this was a feature until I was working on the crowdfunder for the Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 2, and then I was like, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So yes, there will be more announcements for the C3 Anthology 2023. The closer that we get to the date,
Mhm.
this live stream was with Jack Wallace, who was one of the contributors for the anthology. Our next live stream, highlighting other creators for the anthology, I believe our next one is August 9th. Don't quote me on that. The exact schedule is going to be on our social media streams. So check our social media pages.
Absolutely.
The schedule will be there. Find out more at ko-fi.com/. I have to do the dab. Columbus Cartoon Coalition. To find out more about us, the link is
Mhm.
also streaming along the bottom of the screen here. Jack, any final thoughts before we sign off?
You were close. It was August 3rd at 60:30 is
Thank
Robert
you.
Montserrat. Is next up.
Thank you. I was being egotistical and thinking of the next one that I was hosting. But yes, there will be another stream August 3rd. Keep your eye out for that one as well.
Mhm.
And if you're on YouTube, do the YouTube things, notification, subscribe, all that stuff. That's
Well,
it.
I'm
So,
also very excited about the Jamie Roberts. I count me in. I'm a big fan. So yeah.
oh, thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
for folks who might be interested, my book, The Legend of Jamie Roberts, Volume 2, is now on Crowdfunder. You can find out more info at thelegendofjamieroberts.com. So there we go.
Perfect. Good.
Yeah. All right. That's all I've got for now. Any final thoughts before we skedaddle on out of here?
Um, no, just a big shout out to the to C3 and to all the Columbus comic creative people out there. So thank you for all
Absolutely.
doing it and keep it up. I want to read all the works. I want to read all the panels. So
And
Please
you
stay
will
making them.
very
Yes.
soon when we launch on Crowdfunder August 14th. All right. Thank you all so much for watching. This is apparently something that they do on some of these streams that they'll do C3. Which is just, I think that's just cute. I'm going to do it.
I like it. It's very cute.
Yeah.
I thought I was supposed to put three. I don't know. Yeah.
We can. Hold on. Oh God, the mirror.
Am I the
Oh
three?
God, how is this? Oh geez. Oh geez. Oh God, I can't. My dyslexia.
All right, I'll just do C. Wait, no, C. There we go.
Oh no, the disaster.
This is way more complicated than I would expect it to be. But
I know. My gosh. But hold on. Yes.
there you go.
Okay.
Good. We got one in. That's the.
We got one in. We got one in. There we go. Oh, disaster averted.
There we go.
Yes. Thank you all so much for watching. Do all the YouTube things and the Facebook things. Stay tuned for more updates for the C3 Anthology 2023 and future interviews with other creators. Thank you again for watching. You are awesome.
Bye.
Bye.